Every single day, roughly a quarter of the world's traded oil squeezes through a stretch of water barely 1.7 miles wide. It's called the Strait of Malacca, and if you wanted to cripple China's economy without firing a single missile, you wouldn't need an army. You just need to block this strait. 80% of China's oil imports pass through it. One blockade, one accident, one hostile navy parking a few warships in the right spot, and China's entire energy supply grinds to a halt. Beijing knew this, so they built a way around it. Not through better ships or more warships of their own, but by going under the ocean entirely, and then overland. 2 pipelines stretching nearly 800 kilometers each, cutting straight through the heart of Myanmar. Combined with the deep water port built to feed them, this is one of the most expensive insurance policies any country has ever bought, and most people have never heard of it. To understand why China built this, you have to understand what keeps Chinese energy planners up at night. China is the world's largest oil importer. Most of that oil comes from the Middle East and Africa, and almost all of it travels by tanker. Those tankers have one practical route into China, through the South China Sea, funneled through the Strait of Malacca between Malaysia and Indonesia. This is what strategists call the Malacca Dilemma. In peacetime, it's just a busy shipping lane, but in any serious conflict, say over Taiwan, the United States Navy could theoretically choke that strait shut in days. No invasion of China required, just control the choke point and you control China's fuel supply. For a country that imports the majority of its oil, that's an unacceptable level of exposure. China's answer was elegant in concept. If the sea route is the vulnerability, build a land route that skips it entirely. Myanmar gave China exactly what it needed. A western coastline on the Bay of Bengal, completely bypassing the South China Sea, with a relatively short overland path into China's interior. The town chosen for this was Kyaukpyu, a coastal settlement in Rakhine State that most of the world had never heard of before Chinese state oil companies showed up. The plan was to build a deep water port at Kyaukpyu capable of receiving the largest oil tankers, and then run 2 pipelines inland from there, one for crude oil, one for natural gas, across the entire width of Myanmar and into China's Yunnan province. Tankers from the Middle East and Africa could dock at Kyaukpyu, offload, and send their cargo straight into China by pipeline, never coming anywhere near the Strait of Malacca. Construction on the pipelines began in 2009 and finished by 2017. The port project itself, a separate, even larger undertaking, was valued at over $7 billion, with an additional special economic zone bringing total investment in the Kyaukpyu corridor close to $10 billion. The pipelines themselves came in at roughly $2.5 billion. Either way you measure it, this is one of the most expensive single bets China has placed on energy security anywhere in the world. The crude oil pipeline runs 771 kilometers from Kyaukpyu to Yunnan. Tankers arrive from the Middle East and Africa, offload at the deep water terminal, and the oil flows north through steel pipe instead of sailing another 3,000 kilometers around Southeast Asia. At full capacity, the line can move 22 million tons of crude per year. Myanmar itself is entitled to keep roughly 2 million tons of that for its own domestic refineries. A small cut, but a meaningful one for a country with chronic fuel shortages. Running parallel to it is the natural gas pipeline, slightly longer at 793 kilometers. This one doesn't rely on imported tankers at all. It draws gas directly from offshore fields in the Bay of Bengal, gas that belongs to Myanmar itself, and pipes it straight into southwestern China where demand for energy has been growing faster than almost anywhere else in the country. The gas line can carry up to 12 billion cubic meters annually, and Myanmar is allowed to retain as much as 1/6 of that for domestic use. Gas that gets tapped off at stations along the route and fed into local power grids. That detail matters more than it sounds. For communities living along this pipeline corridor, those tap-off stations are the difference between having electricity and not having it. In a country where huge portions of the population still lack reliable power, a Chinese energy pipeline built for Chinese strategic interests has quietly become a source of light and heating for Burmese towns it passes through. Strategically, this project is a cornerstone of Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, but its real value goes deeper than economic diplomacy. China now has an overland escape hatch for its energy imports. Oil and gas can enter the country without crossing the South China Sea or squeezing through the Strait of Malacca, the same stretch of water carrying roughly 80% of China's oil. In a worst-case scenario where those waters become contested or blockaded, whether by a rival navy, a regional conflict, or simply choke point congestion, this Myanmar corridor keeps fuel flowing into China's landlocked southwest, regardless of what's happening at sea. It also shaves real time and distance off the journey from the Middle East, since oil no longer has to sail the long way around Southeast Asia. It also does something subtler. It ties Myanmar's economy directly to China's. Transit fees from the pipelines flow into Myanmar's government coffers. The tap-off stations support local industry and electrify nearby towns, and construction alone created thousands of jobs along the route. The entire corridor reinforces the political and financial relationship between Naypyidaw and Beijing at a time when Myanmar, isolated by sanctions and consumed by civil war, badly needs the partnership and the leverage that comes with it. Here's the part that genuinely surprises most people. Myanmar has been gripped by civil war since the 2021 military coup. Entire regions have splintered into conflict zones controlled by competing militias, ethnic armed organizations, and the military government itself. Infrastructure across the country has been damaged, sabotaged, or simply abandoned. And yet the pipelines have kept running. Both the military government and various armed opposition groups operating near the pipeline route have, for the most part, left it alone. Not out of restraint, but out of calculation. The pipeline represents enormous economic value and an even bigger source of leverage with Beijing. Whoever controls territory along that corridor gains a direct bargaining chip with one of the most powerful governments on Earth. Sabotaging it would burn that leverage for nothing. So instead, the pipeline has become something closer to a shared interest. A rare piece of infrastructure that armed factions on opposing sides of a brutal conflict have quietly agreed not to destroy. That's the real story here. A $2.5 billion engineering project sitting inside a $10 billion strategic corridor has become so valuable that it's outlasted a civil war. Not because anyone is protecting it out of goodwill, but because everyone involved understands exactly what it's worth. China didn't just build a pipeline. It bought itself an alternative to one of the most dangerous geographic vulnerabilities any major economy has ever faced. A single choke point that could, in theory, bring its entire energy supply to a halt. For a few $1 billion and nearly a decade of construction, Beijing converted that vulnerability into a backup route that no foreign navy can easily touch. And Myanmar, in the middle of its worst political crisis in decades, has held on to its end of the deal. Not out of loyalty, but out of necessity. Every faction fighting over what's left of the country understands that the pipeline is worth more intact than destroyed, because losing that leverage with Beijing would leave them with nothing left to bargain with at all.